Have you had the experience where you feel really understood by someone and that you feel like you really understand them, like they really get you? That's something that I call signal flow. And it has to do with using the mechanisms we have for communication in a way that creates a sense of safety and co-regulation. So, one of the key features of our communication system, one of the main points of it, is to convey our internal state and our needs to another. But another key feature of it, another key reason we communicate, is also to test the responsiveness of another. So, as I have my internal state and my intentions, my needs, my desires, I use different frequencies to send that out. And based on the response of the person, I know whether they are tuning in, they are attuned to what I'm saying or not. So, for example, if I'm in a state of playfulness and safety, and I send those frequencies out, but they are met with threat or rejection or even a turning away, that's considered in a sense a violation of this signal flow. And so that is not tuning in to what my signals are sending out. If they respond with frequencies that indicate also playfulness and safety, then we are matching. They are matching my signals and we are attuned. And that attunement actually creates a sense of psychological safety, which is really helpful for restoration of our internal organs. It keeps us from being in a state of threat and defensiveness and self-protection. Because if they are not matching, then because they're not responding and they're not matching and attuning to what I'm saying, I don't know necessarily what's going on with them. And I don't know if they know what is going on with me. So that creates an uncertainty, and it's very difficult for me to know what my next move is in that sense. So signal flow is something that feels really good, is very healthy for us, and it's a very positive goal to try and achieve in our relationships and interactions with others. So, but there are two key things that can prevent signal flow, and those two key things are signal suppression and signal avoidance. So, signal suppression can be other-induced or self-induced. Other-induced signal suppression is generally when there's a power dynamic, and so this can be in a family or in a work organization where one person has potentially a dominant position in a hierarchy and or uses size or any kind of physical type of aggression to indicate that other responses may not be appropriate. So if they're asking for something or they're conveying something, and you as another person in this dynamic would like to say no instead of yes, or disapprove or disagree, but that person uses either threats of aggression or even reminders of their higher up position in the hierarchy, or that they are the supplier of resources and can take them away, things like that. Those are different types of power dynamics that can occur that get me then, as the lower ranked person in that sense, or smaller, or whatever it is, or dependent person, to suppress my signals. So I'm now going to potentially say yes when I actually want to say no, or I'm going to act like I agree and everything's fine when it's not. So that's other-induced signal suppression. Signal suppression can also be self-induced. So depending on my experiences with communication and potentially those kinds of power dynamics, I might also have certain algorithms as well where I predict that me saying yes or me disagreeing or me disapproving or saying no, those are kinds of things that might result in something bad happening to the relationship. If those were my experiences when I was young, then I may now in different dynamics do the same thing. So I may also contort my facial expressions to smile even though I'm upset, or suppress the signals that I would, that are truly aligned with my internal state. So being uncomfortable or disagreeing, I suppress those signals. So I restrict my throat muscles, I restrict how I'm expressing myself. In order to, in a sense, appease that person. And then another way that we prevent signal flow is through signal avoidance. So signal avoidance is when we are not tuning into our internal sensations. So remember that communication is meant for tuning in to internal sensations and internal state and expressing that outward. In signal avoidance, we may have different sensations that are coming up, but we do everything we can to avoid feeling them and tuning into them. So to not notice them. So we will numb out, we'll use substances, we'll get hypersocial, hyperactive, distract, do anything we can to not tune into that. So that's also an issue because in that sense, because we are not tuning in, what the signals that we are sending out are not actually really aligned, or they're not particularly accurate or complete representations of our internal state in order to express that to somebody else. So that also can just create challenges in the signal flow in the communication. So the best way to get into signal flow is to try to tune into our internal state as best we can, and to figure out ways to not suppress and to actually express as best we can our internal state. There are two key ways that we can do this. One is to practice on our own through, for example, journaling. So journaling is a really powerful way to tune into our internal state and then find ways to describe it in just a very safe environment and see how that looks on the page. You actually can then become an observer to all of that. And as you do that, you build a vocabulary and a way of learning how to match what you're feeling with what you are expressing. And that can help you get better with being able to express it with others. And another way to get better at signal flow is to experiment. It takes practice. So that means that if you tend to suppress a lot, through the signal suppression, or you avoid a lot, try the other thing. So try actually to tune in, try not to say no, or try to say no when you want to say no and yes when you want to say yes, for example. And to do that in safe relationships and friendships, and do as much as you can to practice that so that your system gets better and better at tuning in and then creating the actual vibrations that align with what you really want to say. So those are some ways to get into signal flow, and I really recommend it because it's very helpful for our nervous system and our brain. And if you'd like to know more, you can go to stephaniefay.com, and I have more articles and videos to come. Thank you.